Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome back to the Out Entrepreneur. A weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. On this week's episode, we are back in the studio for another office hours session. As a reminder, the series is designed to support those of us thinking about getting started or growing our businesses. With audience feedback, we recognize that these episodes have already added tremendous value, and we're going to continue to air them every other Tuesday in between the usual episodes, where I will continue to feature some of the world's best and brightest LGBTQ plus entrepreneurs. My faithful sound engineer and non-binary pod to the people business owner, Alain Beausoleil, will riff and reflect back with me all that we continue to learn from amazing outbosses featured on past episodes of the show. And together, it's our goal to amplify the wisdom so many LGBTQ entrepreneurs have shared to deliver the best business advice centered around leveraging our rainbow superpowers. So, Alain, you ready to do this?
I am ready, rip-roaring and ready.
I love it. All right, let's do the thing. Okay, so if you've been following the Office Hours series, we've already had 3 sessions. So if you've gone to all 3 of those sessions, you are ahead of the class. And on the first few sessions, we talked about finding a business idea, stepping into the boss mindset. And on our last session, we had a special guest, Jax Wheatley, on the show to help us deconstruct this mantra of revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash flow is queen. One of the things that popped up when we were talking with Jax, and Alain, you actually brought this up, was, okay, we're talking a lot about money. How do we get our mindset right around money in particular? Just like the idea of having it flow into our businesses, and what happens when we have any kind of blockages, et cetera, et cetera. I thought like this episode, we can dig a little bit deeper into that and deconstruct this kind of, out in the kind of the world right now is this feeling of abundance and mindsets around abundance and a both and approach versus kind of scarcity mindset of like, a win or lose, zero sum. If I get something, you lose something. And then there's a lot of anxiety and fear around that. So that's where we're going to go. We'll see what the conversation, how it flows and what comes up. The first kind of question I want to throw out, and we both can kind of share our feedback on it, but I'm going to give it to you, is, what kind of mindset shift does it take to go from feeling like you don't have enough money in your business to feeling abundant, right? And so I know like this is something that ebbs and flows, and I don't know if we have answers to it, but maybe like our thoughts around this question, right? Of how do we, and I think definitely for myself getting started of like, where will I find clients? How do I market? Will there be enough?
There are a lot of questions.
Yeah. So like, what are some of those questions? Like when you started Pod to the People. Well,
I'm still getting the website up. So I have some real life things happening here. So for instance, I want to post a rate, correct, on my website. Mm-hmm. But then the other day, I got approached by someone that was going to pay me $50 more per episode that I would be editing. So I was like, well, I don't want to shoot myself in the foot. If I put my rate up on my website for everyone to see, I wouldn't have made $100 an episode as compared to the $65 that I'm advertising.
Yeah. I think that's a real dilemma of putting yourself out there and being really clear, like, these are my offerings, right? But this dilemma, if you're providing a service, that service and kind of the level of care and attention that you give to that service, I mean, that will vary from customer to customer, client to client, right? So, if you're working with a professional studio, where they have a robust budget, that might look different than working with a startup founder who you might have a relationship with and you may want to offer some kind of pro bono discount to, right? And so that's of interest, and maybe we can throw this out to the audience, those folks who are involved in the Facebook community, the Out Entrepreneur Facebook community, is how do you all handle your, posting your offerings, and do you or do you not put your rates, your fees on the page, on the webpage? And I know for myself, I've experimented around with, different offerings where when I first got started, I wanted to do like a friendly website audit of businesses that care a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion. What's your web presence look like, and kind of making that an offering. And I think that's actually still under my resources section And I basically put the rate of what that would cost. It was a flat rate just to kind of see, that was an experiment. Is there even a demand or an interest for something like that? And, it was a mixed bag.
Right.
Like most of those that's the great thing about, the online website is it's kind of, you immediately get to test it. It's not like you have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in marketing pre-internet of seeing if the offering that you have, if there's even a demand or a market for it. You can find out right away.
Mm-hmm.
And you can, if you want to draw more eyes and attention to it, there's lots of digital ads, like ways to kind of promote something. Just as an experiment. There's a lot of marketers, and I am not a marketing guru, but just kind of this A/B testing type thing of running two comparable ads and changing just a few words to see, does that attract more customers? And once they're on a page, right, if you've listed your rates or not,
mm-hmm.
how do they respond? And that's one thing that I think could be helpful for folks is I just started using this service called Instapage. So it's kind of like lead pages where it's landing pages that aren't necessarily associated with a website. So I use Squarespace. So there's not a lot of functionality. Like you can't change the theme or the page around. So on Instapages, you can develop different landing pages for different products or services. So this could be something that potentially could help you or other folks kind of struggling with, do I list my rates or not? And you can literally, super easy, pretty quickly, design one landing page that features your rates
mm-hmm.
and then one landing page that doesn't. So say you're not sure, if a potential customer has a big budget or not, you may want to send them the landing page with the service offering that talks about all the great things that you do for producing a podcast, but not necessarily tying rates to it, like, suggesting that this is negotiable depending on what you want, how you want to engage, versus say there's someone who really wants to work with you, but maybe you don't think that they could afford your rates, or you just don't even want to have the conversation. It's like, this is what it costs to work with me.
Yeah.
That's where you would kind of then use that landing page. And if folks do that, I'd be really interested in hearing how that works. I've experimented with it as well. And again, it's just helpful. Yeah.
Those pages are connected to your Square account?
Squarespace. Yeah,
Right,
you could.
right.
Yeah, you can link it up. So basically, they're separate landing pages. And the cool thing about it is it's like, pod to the people, this is what it costs to produce a podcast, say it's like the full package, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you don't want to list your rates there. You just kind of describe what it is. And, if you want to learn about who I am or past clients, there's a link that someone could click on, and then it would go to where your business lives online, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So the landing page is just something, you could keep it for forever. It could be something temporary, but just to have a couple of variations of it that might be helpful. In this instance, you could have, here's my landing page with my concrete rates. Here's another landing page with no rates. It just describes the service. And then here's a landing page that shows like a sliding scale or something like that. So at least you can kind of, from, say you're working with a nonprofit or a government agency, and maybe like some of those kind of lower rates to, I'm working with Merck or some kind of big
Sure.
corporation that they probably have a healthy budget for this kind of like content marketing,
Right.
So I don't know. Those are my best thoughts on that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
There's some convenience as well as just being like, doesn't matter. Here's my rate.
Yeah.
There's the convenience of it, and it's like easy for the consumer to understand.
Yeah, I tend to do that with speaking engagements because sometimes people will come to me and say, hey, will you come to this event? And it sounds great. And the expectation is it's for free or for a couple $100 or something. And it's just like, here's my rates for, doing a 90-minute engagement, a keynote speech, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just, it makes kind of that a little bit easier. One, because there's certain exemptions. If it's a, trans nonprofit, I believe in the cause, sure, that's a pro bono kind of thing that I would be happy to do on a limited basis, right? Because there's only so much time in the day, right?
Sure.
But then, for those organizations that maybe they don't have a budget, but they could refer me to someone else, it's like, here's my rates. Oh, that's too much for us. Okay, great. Here's a referral of a couple other people that might be able to kind of meet you within that range. And if you see other opportunities, for someone like me, please keep me in mind. So it's kind of you're still giving value. So I think that could extend to prospective customers who are looking for podcasting services where you can say what you're, flat out, you can be like, these are my rates. If someone's like, whoa, that's too much. just kind of think in mind, and this is where you build your network of peers, of maybe other folks in the space that say they're newer, right? They don't have the years of experience that you have, and you really believe in like lifting them up, right?
Right.
Kind of saying, hey, sometimes I'll have big projects I would love to bring you on board to contract with, right? Or occasionally I'll get customers that just, they're not within my range, but you're just getting started. Would you be open to like getting customers that are willing to pay whatever is within their budget, and just kind of building out that network too? Because the more that you can refer to others, and I think that then goes to this abundance versus scarcity mindset, right?
Perfect.
Is you're giving to other folks in the field, you're giving opportunities for younger folks, professionally younger, with less experience, to gain that experience, and they're going to keep you top of mind as well. So if there's a big project and maybe they don't have the capacity to do it, they're like, I remember Alon gave me that opportunity. I'm going to reach back out and see, is this a possibility? I think in the field that I'm in, I see that happen a lot just because, doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work, there's so many different angles of what your specialty is, like what your sweet spot, your niche. And you definitely want to bring in other folks to kind of, especially on bigger projects, just to round it out and make sure there's different voices and lived experiences that also have the experience to help change workplace culture, right? It's not always... There's definitely industries where it can be cutthroat, right? But it doesn't have to, even in, I don't know, I'm guessing thinking like in banking, right? I mean, there's lots of other models of how to do business that are more collaborative, right?
Sure, and I've had a lot of help along the way. I had a mentor that taught me how to run a recording studio when I was 18.
Yeah.
So it's...
Yeah. It's cool.
Yeah.
Right.
It's fun to give back as well.
Yeah. And I mean, and I think that's in the spirit of the Out Entrepreneur show is like, that's a popular question that we often ask guests is just kind of, what are ways that you're giving back? And I think in this instance, if someone's not within kind of the range to sustain you in your business, thinking about how like folks that are a little bit newer, a little bit green behind the ears, like giving those opportunities. And I think that exchange is really valuable. Kind of going back to the initial question, because we talk and we go in different directions, but this kind of abundance mindset too, as opposed to scarcity. I think like one of the ways for me to think about like what is an abundance mindset to begin with is getting really clear around what makes me happy, what makes me feel successful, what makes me feel abundant. Like an example of what makes me feel abundant, having a lot of toilet paper in my house. For some reason, I like,
that's your thing.
Like I feel rich when there's like a closet full of toilet paper and I'm not like scrambling. I don't know. It's weird, right? But like, I guess like the reason why I use that example is just thinking about what are your own definitions of those things as opposed to what society layers on the expectation of being happy, or being successful means X, Y, and Z, or being abundant means having $1 billion business and traveling the world and doing all these things. Like, I guess, like, I think if we can get clear on our own definitions around that, we don't run the risk of living out someone else's dreams or living out someone else's vision of what success looks like. And you end up with $1 billion business, say, but you're still feeling something that's lacking, right? And you're like, wait, I did all of these things right. I followed this path. I've built this big successful business, at least by other people's standards, and I'm still feeling like it's like that U2 song, right? I still haven't found what I'm looking for, right? I don't know if that like we have to do royalties on that, but you know what I mean? Like
that makes sense. Yeah. And I guess I could see part of the mindset being like, I finished this job and I got paid, and you could either be like, I hope I get another job soon. Or you could be like, that next job is coming.
Yes.
So it's a slight, it seems subtle, but it's a difference between like, I'm abundant because the next one is coming.
Yeah.
Or I'm in dire straits because I don't know when the next one is coming.
Yeah. And did that job make you happy? Like, was that your ideal customer? Did you get joy from doing that thing? Because those are the breadcrumbs too, that you either follow that, you continue to follow that path of like, you just did a audiobook recording with me, right? Like, Rhodes, I really enjoyed that. If you did, I don't know. Like, we can talk about it on air or off. But like, do you know of other authors? Because I really like that. Or, you know what? Like, I didn't really, that was cool. But like, my passion is recording and music. Do you know of other music artists like in the Portland community or elsewhere that are looking for a great sound engineer, right? Like, that's exactly like what you're saying. You finish a project, and I think that that's the choice of wow, I don't have anything else in the pipeline, or, oh, I finished that project and I actually really liked it. And here's a new way of thinking about my business because I wasn't really sure if I could take on that project or should have, but wow, I really am surprised by how I feel about it. So I think that's kind of checking in, opening up this idea of, there's a podcast that I listen to called Being Boss, and they have this method called the chalkboard method, right? Which is this idea that, one, you kind of map out success for you in a year. And part of success is like, well, how much revenue do you want to bring in? How much profit do you want to have? How much cash flow, right? We talked about that in the last office hours, right? But you do the math of like, this number makes me feel abundant, and having the faith to believe that you can do it, right? So it's kind of filling in the empty space of like, I want to make upper six figures, I want to make $1 million, 500, whatever it is, right? Like you do the math. So you put it out there and you're brave enough to say what that number is, right? And I think that's the first thing, is this, saying it in your mind, being okay with that, and then vocalizing it out loud, maybe in the mirror, and then taking that next bold leap of like saying it to a trusted colleague of like, I'm going to do this, even if it feels like fraudy, or like, I'm not sure if I can. But you put it out there, and then you do the math of like, okay, if you work with clients, if you have online products, if you speak, if you have a blend of all these things, what are the activities that it's going to take to get you to that level? Short of, oh my gosh, I have to hire more people to get to that level for this business, right? Whatever it is. And then you kind of like look at the months. You have 12 months in the year to get to that number. Start filling in the blanks of like just leaving open space of like, I need to make X amount of dollars of revenue in January, February, March, and leave it there, leave it open, and it literally is like a chalkboard or a whiteboard or a piece of butcher paper or whatever on your wall, but like literally put it out there. And it's kind of incredible. I tried it my first year of business. I was like, oh, I don't know about this,
Right.
And I'm pretty woo-woo, but that felt like, whoa.
It was like an economic vision board or something.
Yeah, really. It really was. And it's pretty incredible how it filled up, Like, and I literally put like spaces, like lines of like, I need X number of clients, X amount of dollars for each client to get to this goal. And it was pretty cool to see it fill. So I think like that's maybe one way of being open to uncertainty, where it's, especially if you're new in business and you're really trying to figure out, how do I make this thing work? I mean, sometimes it is basic math, and you work back to the goal. You work back from that end date of like December 31st of 2019. This is where I'm going to land on the amount of revenue coming into the business. Here's what it's going to take to get to that number. So,
and what if you don't hit it?
Yeah. Well, that is super important too, right? So that's part of goal setting, right? Is that sometimes you put out into the universe, this is what I want to see happen. I want to manifest this. And the universe kind of works on its own clock. That's usually not a calendar that's based in our reality. There's going to be they're data points, right? They are data, so it's okay, December 31st, 2019, my goal was whatever my goal was. Here's where I landed, and kind of do the assessment. Like, how far off were you from that goal? I always say start with like your strengths, like what worked really well. What was something surprising that you didn't imagine happen? What was a project that you got, if you do kind of contract-based work, that you really like, that you didn't necessarily think was a part of your business model, but whoa, it brought you a lot of joy in your own definition of what that joy is, and how could you open up to more of those opportunities? And then the things that were failures, and literally like owning that. And it's kind of this idea of, failing forward, or like, it's this like the no's or the rejections. Was there a trend around that? Say you wanted to develop a product or a service and you realize like nobody wanted that product or service. So maybe going back to asking better questions of your ideal clients of like, what is the thing that they need that obviously this product or service wasn't meeting? And is there anything from that offering that I could adjust to meet that need? Or do I need to listen better to the potential clients I want to work with, right?
Or exit out, I guess, as well, right? Like that totally didn't work.
Yeah. And that's okay. I mean, like if you know in your heart that you want your own business, you want to be an entrepreneur, and the thing that you thought was going to be your business just was a total failure. That doesn't mean that you as a business owner are a failure. It's just that business idea, that model didn't work. I mean, how many, if we look at like the great business gurus of the world, I mean, I'm sure each of them could name 12 different failures that they had to get to that place where they are.
And sometimes their successes turn into something totally different as well. So Amazon was just going to be the biggest bookstore.
Right.
And look what happened.
Are they? Right. Yeah. Now they're like Walmart online on steroids, I mean,
Sure.
It's like for better or worse, right? I mean, we can have a whole show critiquing that model, but like it changes over time, right? And that there's nothing wrong with change. It's just, I think like one of the things of an abundant mindset is allowing flow to happen, right? And not being so rigid that this is the thing that I do and I will only do this thing. And, sometimes if you become that tunnel vision, if you're just staying in a very narrow lane, you may miss out on opportunities for collaboration, for thinking about, how other industries are impacting your industry and how you can kind of create some kind of hybrid that's speaking to a trend in the world that could be the next Uber or Lyft, or like, just things that didn't exist when you or I were kids, but now are like these, how could you live in a world without going to the airport and expecting a car share to pick you up, right? I mean, like...
And that kind of plays into the advice we were given last week about nurturing, like thinking of money as a little kid. And so your business, I'm thinking just now, like a little kid, it needs new clothes every year.
Yes. Yeah. I love that analogy. Yeah.
So it's going to change,
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you love it less, right?
Right. Yeah. It's really different. And like the more kind of like perseverance that you have to stick with it, if you do have that fire in your belly and this is what you want, to run your own business, to be that visionary, it's going to grow up. It's going to change. And sometimes it will develop its own personality, right? Just like a teenager,
Sure.
Following those trends, like seeing what it's like for a kid, you're tracking the height of the kid and how the kid is growing, right? I mean, your business is similar. You've got to really know your numbers and use that data to inform future decision making, right? And not to kind of lose sight of yourself in the business, right? Because I think it then goes back to what will fulfill you, what will make you happy, what will make you feel abundant, like you have enough. If you want to limit it to numbers, if one of your goals for your business is financial freedom, what does that mean to you? Because we can see people that continue to grow and grow and grow their businesses, and it's almost like it's just more and more and more, and it's never enough. So maybe for yourself, what is enough? Just doing that thought exercise alone might be helpful. Hey, Outbosses, Rhodes Perry here. As you all know, part of my passion for this podcast is to empower you and fellow LGBT entrepreneurs to cultivate a feeling of purpose and belonging in your business. To know that you can show up and be the most authentic version of yourself. Purpose, belonging, and workplace culture are concepts I take seriously in my own consulting business. In fact, I'm on a mission to empower leaders just like you and those on their way to joining us to cultivate cultures of belonging. In my upcoming book, Belonging at Work, I share some of my personal struggles of coming out as a trans guy in the workplace and how I leverage this experience as one of my business superpowers. Now, I'm on a mission to support you in taking simple actions that will make a world of difference for anyone who has ever felt as if they needed to hide important aspects of themselves on the job. When you commit to purchasing a special, limited edition copy of the book, a portion of your purchase will support expanding workplace opportunities for fellow transgender and non-binary people. An added bonus, your story about what it means to belong at work will be featured on the book's website to inspire others. You're ready to belong at work now. To learn more, visit rhodesonamazon.com or text 444-999 and type the word belong. Again, that's rhodesonamazon.com or text 444-999 and type belong. That kind of leads to this other question that I had for this kind of office hours for you and I. And again, who knows if we have answers to it or not, but it's just something to pose for our audience is, do you practice visualization of things you'd like to have more of in your life, kind of going into that abundance mindset? And if so, how do you do it, in terms of visualization? So when you're thinking about Pod to the People, how do you visualize what that looks like over time? Or, do you even have time to kind of pause for 5 minutes to be like, okay, this is what this looks like over time.
Yeah, I have, and I've done that, and I think I need to do it on a more consistent basis. So I think for me, it's the discipline that's really hard. So I think I need to get in the mindset of like keeping that vision fresh and moving more often beyond just the beginning of a business.
Yeah, I think you're right. It depends how busy I get in the work. That sometimes I'm like, oh, this miracle hour in the morning, I love it, and I don't have time. I have to like jump right into work. I try very hard to kind of preserve like that first hour to go for a walk, to meditate, to journal, ideally doing all of those things, but sometimes one is enough, one is success, right? Because I can get a little type A even about that stuff. You're supposed to be like relaxing and visualizing. I'm like, I must journal for 15 minutes. So I try to be a little graceful with myself, but especially when I am able to meditate, I try to visualize just the intention of having a smooth day, or, trying to welcome positive things into the day or the week, the year, whatever it might be. But the writing down, like I think the meditation and the journaling really helps, because there's something magical about writing down something that you want to see in your life and consistently doing it, even if it's like a bullet, a couple bullets every day, that if you can track that over a year, or even, looking back at old journals just to see where you are based off of what you wanted to see in your life, it's pretty cool, like when it arrives, because it's usually not on our timeline. So like what you said, the question about the goal of like, okay, it's December 31st, 2019, you don't meet your goal. I can guarantee that if you look back a decade from now about whatever that thing is, you're going to start to see signs of it, right? And it might not look exactly the way that you thought, and it might be even bigger than what you thought, but it's there, and it's pretty cool. So I think like in journaling, when I first got started, I really wanted to do a lot of international travel through work. And I was like, okay, in the second year, I'm going to be doing this. Well, I've been in business. This is almost my fourth year, like in total. And this past week, I got an inquiry from someone in Germany who wants me to come to Germany in November to do a thing based on my book, right? And
wow.
I was like, whoa. And, and it was that moment where it was instant connection of like, I wanted this thing to happen. Did it happen on my timeline? No, but it happened. And when it did, it just felt like that was a success to me. That was something that I wanted to see in my business. So I think that then it just goes back to patience too, of like, you just got to keep showing up. You got to keep trusting. You have to have a lot of faith and confidence in yourself. And I think the more that you do, that helps me feel successful. That helps me feel like, okay, I'm doing it. And it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think that makes sense. I do a lot of meditation. Do you write about your meditations? You're journaling your meditation, or just?
That's a good question. I usually journal after I meditate. Sometimes I have interesting things that happen. I feel like and this is where my type A stuff comes in. Right. So if I like meditated and then journaled, I think like if I committed to journaling about the meditation and the experience all the time consistently, I might make up stuff in my meditation instead of just being there.
Right. And like, I need to write this down. Like, so writing a story.
I'd be like, wait, I have to remember this instead of like, like in the way that I meditate, it's just being okay with like the thoughts that flow in and then they flow out and like not getting attached to anything. I don't know. That's how I approach it. But
I guess it makes sense. So for me, meditation works in visualization. Yeah. But someone else, maybe it's going to wake up every morning and listen to Eye of the Tiger.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
You know, so everyone's going to have to find their own thing.
Yes.
A lot of people are going to meditation. What the?
Yeah.
I'm not going to meditate, which is too bad, but that's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine.
It's not for everyone.
Right. But, whatever it takes.
Yeah. And it's something, I think what it is it's something that's not immediately like all cylinders are firing and you're jumping right into your email or doing a project or whatever as soon as you get out of bed. It's like something that allows you just to connect with your whole self. We talk about being our authentic selves. So like our whole selves, the business stuff is a part of it, but everything else, and just to kind of like step back and kind of like zoom out and figure out where you are in the world right now in this moment. And then you have the whole rest of the day to do all of the zillions of to-dos and task saturation is a new term that I learned. So multitask, just like being overwhelmed by all of the things, you have the rest of the day to do that. So just kind of like giving yourself 5 minutes at the least to kind of do that check-in. I think that can help you really focus in on this kind of idea of, it's a both and. We want to be abundant. We want to cultivate this feeling. And even if in the beginning it doesn't feel like that's there, just keep pointing positive. Then that allows you to kind of take stock of like, these are the amazing things that I can account for right now in my life. Even if it's just being able to wake up and breathe and take a breath, like just thank the world that you can do that, because we're not guaranteed that when we wake up, right? So start by like counting the things that are working and keep documenting those and being grateful for them. Some people say, take it a step further and write thank you notes. So you can write thank you notes to people in your life that make you feel good, and just build from that, because I think that's a contagion that's good. It's positive.
I was doing a thing for a while where I was like, I'd have an encounter with someone, and then I'd go back and I'd kind of give them a little meditation. Like, I really hope great things happen for you. And like with strangers, I would usually focus on strangers. Like that person at the coffee shop looked like they're just having a much worse day than me.
Yeah.
Same as prayer. We talked about this before.
Totally.
More or less. And I'll just give them a little energy.
Yeah.
Hopefully it works, right? But it doesn't hurt anything, that's for sure.
Yeah. There's a couple of meditation teachers, and I think Pema Chodron does this, but I might be wrong. But it's this idea of kind of like, it's using your own breath to transform kind of energy. So if you're present with someone like at a coffee shop who's a little grumpy or whatnot, kind of like breathing that in, that negativity, and then transforming it and breathing out positivity. You're kind of protected from the bad stuff, but you're able, because you're in a different state, to kind of just send that positive feeling of like, it's going to be okay. I see you. I have empathy. Like sometimes it's hard to wake up in the morning with a smile on your face. I got it. And like just trying to meet people with that kind of empathy, love, compassion, whatever you want to call it. But
she's great, by the way.
Yeah, I love her.
Me too.
I love her. All right, we'll include her in the show notes. So maybe like one other kind of thing. I had a whole bunch of questions on this, but we have many more office hours to jump in on these topics, but kind of related to like our own, when we talk about getting clear on our own idea of happiness, success, abundance, this piece where society's layering over what success looks like and what enough looks like and more, blah, blah, blah. A guest that we've had on our show before wrote a book, David DiGiorgio, and in his book, it was all about kind of TED Talks and things of that nature. But he talked specifically about what he called comparanoia, which I loved.
Oh, that's an awesome word.
It's just like this concept of like looking around at others and being like, oh my gosh, they've been in business for X number of years and they've already done X, Y, and Z, and I'm not there yet. And therefore, and then you write the story of the not enough story, the scarcity story. So does comparanoia show up for you? And how do you try to distance yourself from that and just kind of being graceful with where you're at in your process?
It does. And beyond business, in my music, it shows up more so, I think, because I'm like, they already did it.
Yeah.
Like they nailed it. Yeah. What's the use of having, why am I even doing this now? Like I saw Paul McCartney and I was like, I give up. He wrote all the songs or whatever. But then I think the mindset that I use, and I probably I'm trying to do this with my business, is more like they did it, so can I.
Yes.
Instead of they did it and I can't.
Yes.
So that's my mental switch on that.
I love that. They did it and so can I. And it's like, it kind of goes to what we talk about on the show a lot, which is possibility models, right? Of this like seeing it, you have to see it to be it, right? So you have to see Paul McCartney to be like, oh, he did that. Like, what if I did that and then this other thing? And like, boom, I come from a sports background, right? So I think it was Roger Bannister who, up until, I don't know, this is where like the 50s, 60s, whenever Roger Bannister was running, like no one could ever run faster than 4 minutes, right? Like no one could break that barrier. And he did it in whatever year he did it. So someone could Google this right now. Then like several other people that same year saw him break that barrier that no one ever broke before. And then they were able to break it, Like it's just, and so I always use that example because for me, it's just like if someone did it, it's possible for any human to do it. And it's just like the mindset. We just have to get our minds right. And I really love what you're saying. If he did it, or if they did it, or she did it, so can I, right? maybe that's where comparanoia can help. If you're comparing yourself, maybe it's moving from comparanoia to possibility models and really being so congratulatory of someone, like really meaning it. Like if someone in your life achieves something that you want to achieve, it's really being there for them and celebrating their success and not dwelling in kind of like a human trait of jealousy, right?
Right. It should have been me, could have been me kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that doesn't get easier as you get older, I've found as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think so it's kind of like comparanoia to possibility model, right? So the comparanoia is more that scarcity mindset, and the possibility models is like abundance. It's like they did it. I'm celebrating them. I'm so happy for them. And I know that I can do that too. And how great is that going to be when we can talk about our shared successes, right? Because that to me feels successful too.
And with the comparanoia, I think also I start to think, or people start to think, like there isn't enough room for all of us here in this field. The space is taken.
Yes. Yeah. And I think then that goes to kind of this last piece. There's a few other pieces that I wanted to cover on this, but I think one of them is you want to boost your confidence of knowing that you can get there. You can be Paul McCartney, right? Like be bold, right?
Right.
Like we haven't seen the likes of the Beatles in a long time. So we need that again. We need a little bit of Beatle love and magic in our lives, right? So it's like, who do you need to surround yourself to then cultivate that feeling of possibility that you can be there, right? And so it's like the famous quote that you're the average of the 5 people that you hang around the most with, right? So if you're hanging around with people that are like, yeah, that business idea you have, good luck with that, like that kind of negativity, or even kind of like thinking about family, the family that just wants you to be secure and safe. Just get the good job, have the benefits, I'm sure there's a lot of people who can relate to that. Like maybe when you're pursuing your big, bold, hairy, audacious goal, dream, whatever it is, maybe, think about some mentors that really see that vision and believe in you, and, find like 4 or 5 people like that. And if you can't find them in your life real time, one of the things that I find, one of the major reasons why I started the Out Entrepreneur podcast was to find people that were positive, who also understood some of the aspects of being a part of the rainbow family that not everybody understands. And I couldn't necessarily find 5 amazing LGBT entrepreneurs immediately in my circle. So I was like, well, let's start this podcast and like start some phone calls and
they
talk
come
with
to
people.
you.
And boom, we've got like 130 of them now who are possibility models who want all of us to succeed. And, so you can find, I guess my point with that is you can either build those communities, you can find people like that online, you could read books of people that are dead who've already figured this stuff out and kind of modify some of the advice that they've shared. And a book that is kind of, a business classic, for better or worse, is Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, right? And so one of the chapters is he talks about this idea of building an advisory council, and you can have dead people part of it. Abraham Lincoln can be a part of it. Sylvia Rivera can be a part of it. Whoever you want, you know what I mean? But like, think about people that you admire and what would they do? Kind of put yourself in their shoes. And sometimes that could give you the positive role models that might not immediately be showing up in your life right now. But, just like that kind of chalkboard of possibility of revenue, kind of have a chalkboard of possibility of these kind of mentors or advisors, whether they're alive or dead, that could guide you along. I think that's kind of a cool way of thinking about it.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, yeah. So you can have like a little vision board of people, whether they're alive in your life or not, that are in your corner and they have your back and they believe in your vision. And you can add the Out Entrepreneur. You can add all of the guests on this show because we've got your back too. We want to see more Out Entrepreneurs and more of our allies doing amazing things in business to try to make the world a little bit better and giving opportunities to a lot of us who wouldn't otherwise have those opportunities. So, I feel like this is good stuff.
That was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I think that this is good. Maybe like one last piece of advice is this idea of being organized. And this is coming from a Virgo, so I love being organized. So I appreciate people who have different ideas of organization, but I think like that can also help really map out for you getting clarity on happiness, on success, on abundance for you, And going back to that chalkboard method of what at the end of this year, at the end of next year, 10 years from now, what is enough for you? Just thinking about numbers, monetary, like if you had financial freedom, how do you define that? And what would you do with it? Aside from taking care of your basic needs, how would you give back? We've had enough guests on the show talking about ways that they use their business to give back to LGBT communities. So, these are things to think about, and just whether you're kind of writing on your in your journal or, you kind of are talking to friends, what might be ways that we can all get a little more organized and focused on what our goals are. So, I think with that, I think we're good. If you have ideas, thoughts, feedback on our office hours, I would love, love, love to hear from you. And the best way just to engage our community of fellow LGBT bosses, like folks that could be a part of your advisory council to help you feel abundant and enough, that is in our Facebook community, The Out Entrepreneur. So if you haven't yet, check that out. It's a really cool place where we come together. There's some business owners that are talking about cool things that they're doing that can support our businesses. So long as you're adding value to help us kind of continue to support each other and grow, that is a great space to connect. So you can find that in our show notes. Alon, we'll probably have links to books and some of the other stuff we talked about.
Yeah, join the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to kind of keep supporting each other in this. And if there's a specific office hour topic that you'd like to kind of hone in on, let me know. We'll make sure we'll add that to the list of things that people are curious about or want to learn more about. So with that, Alon, thank you for kind of deconstructing this topic of abundance mindset and feeling enough.
My pleasure.
It's always fun. And for all of the outbosses who are tuning in, thank you again for tuning in to this week's episode of our Office Hours. We'll be next week going back into our regular interview. For show notes from today's conversation, you can go over to outentrepreneur.com. And please, please consider subscribing to the podcast, leaving a rating and review, preferably in iTunes. That's the best way to get the show noticed to other folks who can benefit from it. And as always, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.